Welcome everyone to the final day of the A4 Symposium this year. My name is Monika Roy and I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the UMass Lowell Center for Sustainable Production. I'm pretty new to the alternatives assessment world, but I'd like to show off my enthusiasm with this awesome A4 tattoo. So we hope you've enjoyed the sessions this week, from alternatives assessment case studies to lessons learned in policy. We're going to continue diving into these topics for this poster session. But before we introduce our speakers, I'd like to take a moment to thank all of the sponsors that enabled us to put on this event, to have a gathering of alternatives assessment conversation, and to hear about updates in the field. So for this session, we have 8 poster presentations. You may already have had the chance to view the PDF versions of these posters online. And we'll put a link to the chat in the chat to refer to them throughout this session. All of these posters cover really interesting work from many places in the world. And what these presenters have done is record a 5-minute summary about it. So how this session will work is that we'll play all of these presentations one after another. You may need to adjust your sound to hear the presentation well on your end. Afterwards, we'll open up the breakout rooms for each of these poster presenters, where you'll be able to hop from room to room at your will, depending on your topic of interest or who you'd like to interact with. I'll come on again before we open the breakout rooms to explain a few more details about how this will work. And so now we will turn to the presentations. Our first presentation will be from Aude Bechu from McGill University. Give me 1 second.
Hello, thank you for joining me today. I'm Aude Bechu from McGill University, and I'm here to discuss whether substitutes to cadmium-based quantum dots and displays are more sustainable, effective, and cost competitive. A bit of background on me and the other authors. We have strong foundations in chemistry, environmental engineering, and toxicology, and so we used all of those to look at cadmium-based quantum dots for part of my PhD. And to finish it off, we wanted to make sure that the next generation of substances coming down the pipeline would be inherently less hazardous, while still being as high performing as those cadmium-based quantum dots. So what we did is that we decided to divide these next generation of materials into different substance classes. So that's indium-based quantum dots, perovskites, as well as organic emitters. We decided to kind of link this to the possible display types that would end up being marketed to us. So we have our display types in this top row of the table, followed by our different substance classes, followed by individual packages. So we chose specific examples from the literature of red, green, and blue substances and kind of packaged them together as kind of model displays. So our cost, performance, and hazard assessments have pretty simple graphics there, and that's because we really wanted to make this assessment accessible to substance researchers who might not have had much experience with alternatives assessment at all. So our results produced many different graphs, and I'll just decided to show you the very last one down there, which showed that we had no one substance class that scored better than the others. I'm very happy to talk more details in our sort of breakout room, but in conclusion, we saw that more research was needed, especially in decreasing the hazard of the inputs to the substance synthesis, as well as quantitatively reporting the stability of these substances that would be necessary to make kind of a more informed decision. But yeah, in the end, we found no drop in solution, and especially when we were going through the review process on this paper, we realized that more substance researchers should consider alternatives assessment. And if you have any ideas about how to introduce and market alternatives assessment to kind of a new audience, we'll say, please join me in discussion room 1. Thank you so much, and Looking forward to our talk.
Okay, great. Our second presenter is Michaela Cleaver, who will be talking about SUBSPORTplus platform.
Good morning or good afternoon. My name is Michaela Cleaver. I am a scientific advisor at the German Federal Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, the BAuA. Today I present a poster with the title SUBSPORTplus, Information Platform to Support Substitution of Hazardous Chemicals. Substitution is one key element in risk management to protect workers, consumers and environment from chemical hazards. With SUBSPORTplus, the substitution support portal, the BAuA offers a free portal to compile most relevant information at one site. It aims to assist in getting started with the substitution process and in easily accessing necessary information on alternatives. SUBSPORTplus also describes criteria to define safe alternatives. Originally developed in an effort of international experts in 2013, the portal was updated and relaunched by BAuA last year. Please have a look at Figure 1 for a picture of the landing page. The portal gives an overview of information on substitution as well as guidance and offers two databases for directed search for substitution candidates and for alternatives. It covers the topics substances, cases, process, regulation and good practice. And the portal informs under the section News about projects and events on substitution with the focus mainly on activities in the European Union. This poster presents the ongoing and recent updates of the two SUBSPORTplus databases, the database of restricted and priority substances and the database of case stories. The database of restricted and priority substances. For this, we developed a process to update information twice a year, covering the regular updates of the sources, for example, the harmonized classification of substances according to the Regulation for Classification, Labeling and Packaging, CLP regulation. Within 2021, several sources underwent major changes as well. Thereby, we deleted obsolete lists, adapted new updates, and integrated regulatory lists into the database. As a basis to identify safe alternatives, SUBSPORTplus developed screening criteria for human health and environmental hazards as shown in Figure 2. The case stories are undergoing a major update to adapt new harmonized classifications at the moment. By this way, unsafe alternatives should be sorted out. More than 300 case stories have been updated, also with the help of external consultants. We plan to integrate these updates by the end of this year. Coming to the results, with another update underway this month, the database of restricted and priority substances currently contains 33 lists with more than 30,000 entries. In Figure 3, you can see the different types of lists compiled in the database. The search results displays additionally to the typical substance identifiers, the name of the restriction and priority lists, and the property of concern. During our updates, we have observed that the European Union lists and sources more often refer to the chemical regulation lists like REACH and CLP. The database of case stories is the unique feature of SUBSPORTplus with more than 380 case stories. Figure 4 shows the structure of the database and the search options. The case stories derive mainly from practical examples from industry, from reports or studies on alternatives, and they are also extracted from literature. We've managed to gain 11 new case stories as a contribution by the EU Fit for REACH project and from own conducted studies by the BAuA. Conclusion on our update and recent activity is that users can perform a directed search for substitution candidates with the SUBSPORTplus database on restricted and priority substances, for which we will provide updates twice a year. It appears that many lists refer to chemical regulation lists in the EU. The SUBSPORTplus screening criteria define minimum criteria for safe alternatives in terms of human health and environmental hazards. For future sustainability aspects, the current discussions in the EU will need to be considered in a SUBSPORTplus database of case stories. I'm looking forward to discussions in Breakout Room number 2, and I thank you for your attention.
Okay, great. We have our third poster, which is a collaboration between Daryl Ditz and Jonatan Kleimark from ChemSec, and they are going to be talking about the platform ChemCoach.
Welcome. My name is Jonatan Kleimark, and I work for ChemSec, a Swedish NGO with a mission to reduce the use of hazardous chemicals. Today, me and my colleague Daryl will present ChemCoach, a free online tool developed to assist small and medium-sized manufacturers and brands with the aim to eliminate the use of endocrine disrupting chemicals, EDCs. But first, some background. ChemCoach was created as a joint project within the ChemSec business group with important contributions from companies like Apple, H&M, and IKEA. ChemCoach focuses on EDCs. As a primary target, the 32 high priority EDCs identified in previous ChemSec work. However, the methodology is applicable to other substance families as well. As an example, BHT, butylated hydroxytoluene, which is used in pulp and paper products, as well as coatings, inks, and cosmetics, is one of the most searched chemicals on the SIN list, indicating the importance and urgency to understand and solve the challenge of EDCs. The primary target group is SMEs, where the resources, both human and financial, can be limited when it comes to chemicals management, and therefore facilitation of understanding and support for the process is very valuable. In addition, ChemCoach can be used as an internal tool to promote employees' understanding on EDCs and how to avoid them, to inform cross-functional teams and build knowledge on challenges and solutions connected to EDCs. But now, over to Daryl.
Hello, I'm Daryl Ditz with ChemSec, and I'd like to introduce you to the basic functions of ChemCoach. The purpose of ChemCoach is to assist small and medium-sized companies, manufacturers, and others to navigate the process of identifying endocrine disrupting chemicals, EDCs, and removing them or eliminating them from the process, replacing them with safer substitutes. This isn't rocket science, but it does provide a step-by-step approach. Let's take a look at the logic flow. The first starting point is to know if you have EDCs in your process already. They might be part of your formulation, they might be part of your supply chain. And ChemCoach rather helps by identifying 32 commonly used EDCs, such as butylated hydroxytoluene, which is often used in plastics and rubber, or BHA, a preservative that's commonly used in packaging materials or cosmetics. ChemCoach also provides a longer list of EDCs, but these 32 are a good place to start. So if you do find EDCs in your process, then what? Well, the most important question next is to ask, why are they in there? What function do they provide? And that leads you to a process or a search for other kinds of chemicals without the adverse consequences of EDCs that can perform the same function. I want to mention at this point Chemsex Marketplace. That is a business-to-business platform where solution providers meet companies who have challenges. It's a free service. It allows companies to seek those safer alternatives. If they're available, there could be some process changes, there could be some costs, there could be delays, there could be other challenges. If you're a small company, you might want to bring a consultant in to help you work through this process. And if you don't have alternatives, then you have to develop one, and that could be a more challenging process. But important to remember that the point of this is to eliminate the liabilities that are baked in when EDCs are part of your process. There's more that we can say about the ChemCoach process and the practicalities of substitution. I encourage anyone who's interested to join me and ChemSec in meeting room 3. Thank you.
Okay, great. So in our first poster presentation, we heard about assessing alternatives for quantum dots. We then switched over to looking at a few different platforms. We're now going to go back over to alternatives assessed for AFFF, and this presentation is done by Molly Jacobs from the Lowell Center. And we'll turn it over to her.
Hello, I'm Molly Jacobs. I'm a senior research associate at the Lowell Center for Sustainable Production at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. Aqueous film forming foam, or AFFF, is a highly efficient fire suppressant agent used to extinguish flammable liquids and gases. Yet the product contains per and polyfluorinated alkyl substances, otherwise known as PFAS. And the PFAS in AFFF are persistent bioaccumulative substances that have been linked with an array of environmental and human health impacts, including cancer. The National Defense Authorization Act of 2020 requires that the U.S. Department of Defense phase out its use of PFAS-containing AFFF at its military installations by October 1st, 2024. And as a consequence, there has been tremendous investment in the development of fluorine-free alternatives to AFFF. But are they safer and are they feasible? And as you all know, alternatives assessment is exactly suited to address these types of questions. Our project conducted a critical review of existing alternatives assessments to date to support the adoption of safer and feasible alternatives to AFFF. This work was funded by the U.S. Department of Defense's Strategic Environmental Research and Development Program. We conducted literature reviews and outreach to experts to identify and evaluate both governmental and non-governmental assessments that have been conducted on AFFF alternatives. The assessments first had to meet 4 inclusion criteria. First, they had to evaluate commercially available alternatives. Again, this is very important in order to meet that October 1st, 2024 deadline. Second, they had to evaluate hazard, cost, and performance attributes. These 3 attributes are critical in defining any alternatives assessment. We considered both exposure and life cycle attributes to be optional. Thirdly, they had to use the assessments had to use standardized assessment criteria to both systematically evaluate and compare alternatives to the incumbent. Again, this is a process that defines an alternatives assessment. And lastly, it had to include fluorine-free alternatives, address fluorine-free alternatives. Existing alternatives assessments were compared to 2 widely accepted alternatives assessment frameworks, including the National Academy, the U.S. National Academy's framework, and the Interstate Chemicals Clearinghouse framework, otherwise known as IC2. Our review focused on the methods that were used in the assessment, endpoints that were evaluated, as well as how issues of data gaps and uncertainty were addressed. And although there have been a range of efforts to evaluate hazards and performance of AFFF alternatives, we found only one that put it together in an alternatives assessment. And this work was sponsored by the European Chemicals Agency to support a consideration of risk management options for PFAS and firefighting foams, including information that would be needed for the consideration of alternatives in a restriction proposal. We found that the alternatives assessment did generally align with the National Academies and the IC2 frameworks. I won't go into those details here. What I want to focus on is a series of lessons learned to inform future assessments. First is to incorporate case studies into alternatives assessment practice. One of the contributions of the ECA study to the field of alternatives assessment was the use of case studies to exemplify attributes of both technical and economic feasibility. The case studies added much greater understanding of specific assessment criteria that were used beyond just inclusion in a summary table or a comparative matrix, which is what is typically done in alternatives assessments right now. Second is to broaden the scope of the assessment, to not limit the functional use for AFFF alternatives to just film-forming foams, which is what was done in the study. This precludes other alternatives that can extinguish flames via other processes or mechanisms rather than the use of surfactants or wetting agents. Third is to examine a broader set of hazard endpoints using both measured and model data sources rather than depending on safety data sheets. Safety data sheets were what was primarily used in the study, and as many of us know, they have a lot of limitations, especially for comprehensive understanding of hazards, and we can go into that more in the breakout discussion if people are interested. And lastly is to simply augment this ECHA report in the near future based on new work and new alternatives. There are a number of new commercially available alternatives that weren't there when the original study was conducted. There's also an array of research now published on the performance of these alternatives, of the life cycle impacts of these alternatives, of the hazards of these alternatives. So there's an opportunity to conduct a more comprehensive alternatives assessment in the near future, again, leveraging the work of this ECHA study. And with that, I'll close and encourage all of you to join me in poster session room number 4 to continue discussing this work. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. So we're about halfway now through all of our posters, and I'd like to welcome all of the folks that have trickled in past the hour. We are running all of the poster presentations one after another. Please feel free to jot down notes as you hear these posters, and after we go through all of them, we will be opening up breakout rooms where you will be able to interact with all of the poster presenters live. So now we're going to go into our 5th poster presentation. This is by Jessica Leuer, who is from George Washington University, to talk to us about safer pesticides.
My name is Jessica Leuer. I am a chemistry master's student studying at George Washington University. Now it's estimated that over 2 million tons of pesticides are introduced into the environment each year. And as this use of pesticides continues to rise with the increasing crop demand, the global cost-to-benefit ratio of such use has really been on the decline due to overuse, persistence, and the associated negative environmental effects. And despite regulatory emphasis that states that pesticides should not persist beyond their intended period of use, approximately half the detected pesticides today have long since been phased out of use. To combat this reality, my work focuses on the rational design of pesticides with tunable degradation properties and minimal ecotoxicity. Here, I'll describe our development and usage of a comprehensive, tiered-based computational framework which can be used to predict degradation and toxicity, as well as really inform design of better performing analogs by modifying the existing structures. Now, indirect photodegradation with sensitizers in the environment is a main route for pesticide removal, where it can account for as much as 80% of the degradation. And we are able to model this by computing both the thermodynamics and the kinetics of the single electron transfer reaction which takes place between the pesticide and that sensitizer, providing us with a measure of how likely a compound is to degrade in the environment. Now, to integrate ecotoxicity into our assessment, we leverage previously developed design guidelines, which have been extensively validated for fish, crustaceans, and algae. These rules, which are based off cutoff values for just 2 key physiochemical properties relating to bioavailability and reactivity, are able to identify a chemical as safe towards aquatic species. And combining these 2 methods, as well as an assessment of the pesticide function into a single systems-based approach, really allows us to gain a more holistic picture of the compound's environmental impact. And to establish the robustness of our model, we applied this to all relevant pesticides on the US EPA's registry, targeting molecules specifically that contain those photodegradable cores, which included over 16,000 unique interactions. We've also validated our tool against available experimental rate constants as well as cell potentials, and showed that the performance was very good. We had correlations above 0.7 between computed matrix and experiment. Now, in the end, not only is our tool providing an extensive library of pesticides which have been screened for their environmental hazard, which has already been published in Environmental Science and Technology, but it also offers an approach for real-time assessments for users to not only screen new pesticides, but also develop those safer analogs by using the design feature of our tool. As one of the design tiers of our model really helps us understand these structural features that would prevent a compound from being a high performer, and then identifying patterns for the design of more successful alternatives. Now, to incorporate these specific structure-based design guidelines, our tool analyzes the electronic structure of the pesticide and looks at how different substituents can affect the transformation, and then suggests modifications that would yield better outcomes. This design effort really focuses on impacting three key aspects: the photodegradation, the safety, and the performance, where it was found that features such as electron donating groups are able to increase the chance for photodegradation, while ecotoxicity can be altered by adding hydrophilic or removing hydrophobic groups in order to decrease the lipophilicity of the compound. Now, to look at function, we took kind of a unique look at how the functionality and ecotoxicity are related. And we are able to leverage a usually negative relationship into a positive here. We looked at the 700 fully functional pesticides from the EPA's list and really analyzed to identify boundary values of the ecotoxicity parameters for specific pesticide groups, for example, phenols or herbicides or other functional components. Therefore, as long as our newly designed pesticides still fit in the established herbicide box, for example, then it would not be expected to halt the function of that pesticide. Now, culminating all of these methods, we've really created a blueprint or a guide for the end user on this structure to process design of novel pesticides, where we offer three unique design exits corresponding to the three photodegradation tiers, where users can take different exits based on their level of expertise or desired level of accuracy, where these guidelines are able to really be used as validated methods not only to predict which compounds will have favorable properties, but also to be used as a guide to change the structure of a pesticide in order to drive a novel analog towards a desired outcome. And we really see this novel approach, which we have currently submitted in submission with science, becoming a key player in the design stage of new pesticides.
Okay, great. We are now moving into our sixth poster presentation. This is going to be by Hans Plug from Safer Chemical Analytics, here to talk with us about new approach methodologies, or NAMs.
Hi, I'm Hans Plug. I'll be presenting on the use of new approach methods in alternative assessment and its implications for future regulatory decisions. NAMs are increasingly used to perform alternative assessment of newer green chemicals. NAMs use different approaches from old school toxicology testing. They often depend on measuring chemicals' effect on a single step in an advanced outcome pathway, which is hopefully the critical rate limiting step in what is often a complex cascade. This stands in stark contrast to the black box of old school toxicology. Chemical in, effect out, without mechanistic info. So NAMs are superior, cheaper, and faster than rodent study. What's not to like? Regulators are still somewhat uncomfortable with NAMs, although US EPA is adopting them rapidly. NAMs and uncertainty are the issue. Folks are familiar with black box toxicology, NAMs not so much. The inherent uncertainty of classical animal toxicity data is finally being described, and it turns out to be quite high. Recent studies have found that uncertainty in NAMs is often less than or equal to that in classical testing methods. However, ascribed uncertainty factors in risk assessments are often higher for NAMs as compared to classical toxicology data, which reflects a lingering lack of comfort with NAMs. What we did is we looked at the US EPA docket for isothiazolinones, a proposed class of new biocides. The focus was on skin sensitization and associated uncertainty factors. We looked at the NAMs, and they looked at the NAMs, and a defined approach and looked at human versus animal data concurrence. The structure of OIT 2N-octyl-4 isothioazolinone is described below, and as you can see, it's quite complex. The defined approach review showed that NAM skin sensitization data are at a minimum as good as human, let alone animal data. The correct classification rate for human data, in other words, the predictive rate for human data is 82%. For animal model, it's only 59%. And for a Bayesian model of 3 different new approach methods, it is 89%. US EPA, however, assigned an additional tenfold uncertainty factor based on the use of NAM data, even though their defined approach concurred with the one above. Please note that this human to animal data extrapolation is applied here, even though some of the test reflects human in vitro data, although this is an improvement of the uncertainty over the uncertainty factor of 100 previously applied. So we applied a tenfold higher uncertainty factor to the NAM data, even though in the defined approach, NAM data were better than either human or animal studies. This reflects an old school toxicology influence in that people think an animal to human uncertainty factor is needed. Even though this is just a case study, it points out the need of communication of NAM's inherent uncertainty or certainty relative to classic black box data. As here, a correction factor or uncertainty factor of less than 1 appears indicated as compared to classical animal as well as human data. As we noted, this is an improvement over the previously applied uncertainty factor of 100, which was provided in an earlier draft of this document. Use of NAMs will only increase given the time, cost, and ethical advantages of NAM. Hopefully, NAM's acceptance continues to rise in order for alternatives assessment and regulatory assessments to line up regarding greener chemicals effects. Please see my breakout session. Visit me in the breakout section for poster 6 after this. Thank you.
Okay, our 7th poster is by Jen Tenier from Tox Services, and she is going to be talking with us about a comparison between green screen and chem-forward methodologies and looking at a particular example.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Tenier from Tox Services, and I'll be presenting the poster comparing hazards of alternatives using green screen and chem-forward methodologies. Green Screen for Safer Chemicals is a hazard assessment framework that assesses chemicals against 18 human health, environmental, and physical hazard endpoints and results in a benchmark score of 1 to 4, with 1 being most hazardous. ChemForward is an online hazard repository that is based on the globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals, or GHS, and cradle-to-cradle certified material health methodology, and considers routes of exposure and 26 endpoints. ChemForward assigns a hazard band of A to C and F, with F being most hazardous. In this study, green screen hazard assessments for 61 plasticizer chemicals in Tox Services' online ToxFMD screened chemistry library were compared to identify safer alternatives. 8 of these plasticizers were also assessed following the GHS cradle-to-cradle methodology in ChemForward. As an example, on the lower left corner of the poster are the hazard summary tables under each assessment paradigm for dimethyl phthalate. The green screen hazard summary table shows the level of the hazards for each endpoint, which can range from very low to very high, represented by the letter and the color ranging from green to yellow to red. Confidence is represented in italics for low confidence and bold for high confidence. ChemForward displays the results in 2 tables, the GHS view and the cradle-to-cradle, or C2C view, and several endpoints are tiered by route of exposure. The GHS view shows the classification including numerical GHS categories or not classified, classification not possible, or equivocal. Confidence is also represented by italics or bold. The cradle-to-cradle view shows the color ratings corresponding to the cradle-to-cradle certified methodology. Table 1 shows the overall hazard scores. For the 61 plasticizers evaluated under green screen, the resulting benchmark scores and corresponding general chemical structures are summarized in the first and third columns of Table 1. The pie chart in the center of the poster further shows the breakdown of benchmark scores, and about half are benchmark 2, which is use but search for safer alternatives. Only 8 of these plasticizers were also evaluated under ChemForward, and the resulting hazard bands are shown in the second column of Table 1. 5 were hazard band C, 1 was hazard band B, and 2 were hazard band A. These ChemForward hazard bands correlated with the green screen benchmark score as expected, with the exception of the benchmark 3 data gap chemicals. ChemForward does not penalize hazard ratings for the endocrine data gap, as in green screen, and these chemicals fell into the A hazard band. We further examined the green screen benchmark 2 subscores, A through G, that were assigned based on the hazard profiles, illustrated in the blue bar chart. Of the 30 benchmark 2s, 83% are benchmark 2E, defined as posing moderate hazards for carcinogenicity, genotoxicity, reproductive tox, developmental tox, and/or endocrine activity. However, only 8 of the benchmark 2Es are assigned with high confidence. Investigating differences in benchmark 2 subscores could lead to further differentiation among alternatives. As shown in Table 2, of 8 plasticizers also assessed under ChemForward, 5 are benchmark 2E plasticizers by green screen, and the ChemForward, cradle-to-cradle, and GHS ratings align with the 2E sub-benchmark score. I'll be happy to discuss Table 2 in further detail during poster session number 7, if anyone is interested. In summary, both green screen and ChemForward paradigms mostly align and offer hazard scores as well as subscores that provide further differentiation of chemicals. By providing GHS, cradle-to-cradle, and exposure route results, ChemForward presents more information and requires a higher level of expertise to interpret the results. Examining trends in green screen and ChemForward scoring paradigms can provide insight into the identification and design of safer alternatives. I look forward to discussing any questions that you have in poster number 7, breakout discussion. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we have one more poster left, poster number 8, and this is led by Adelina Vuchkova, who is at George Washington University and is going to speak with us about building a model for respiratory sensitization.
Good afternoon. My name is Adelina Vuchkova, and today I'd like to tell you about our team's most recent development of a mechanistic predictive model for an endpoint that is quite often a data gap in alternative assessments, and that's respiratory sensitization. This model is the latest in the CADRE family of tools, and here CADRE stands for Computer-Aided Discovery and Redesign for Respiratory Sensitization. And just briefly to tell you why we felt compelled to develop this class of tools, which started about a decade ago now. Most QSAR models that you're familiar with are highly mechanistic. They use multiple descriptors, usually ones that are focused on chemical structure, and they aim to reproduce some experimental data set. And so in doing so, they often rely on complex statistics, and they're black boxes, meaning that ultimately, if the data set is diverse enough and large enough, they're able to accurately predict chemicals that are close to those in the training set. But ultimately, they're not that useful for informing chemists how to design chemicals with minimal hazard in that category. And so to that end, we envisioned that with sufficient mechanistic knowledge and sufficient ability to model interactions involved in the AOPs of these chemicals, we'd be able to develop more accurate models and ones that are applicable to larger chemical classes and not just to very limited applicability domains. And so to that end, we applied this methodology to respiratory sensitization, and very broadly, this involves 3 different steps: looking at permeability through computational modeling, looking at potential metabolism, and then looking at electrophilic reactivity, which can either be the parent compound or the metabolite. And reactivity here refers to the types of covalent interactions, and they can be in a few broad classes such as Michael acceptors, acyl substitutions, Schiff bases, and some pro-domains which are regarded as metabolism. And so with that, we examined this data set of 241 chemicals for respiratory sensitization that were highly curated for experimental data quality. As you'll see in figure 4, we classify these compounds based on the types of mechanisms through which they might exert respiratory sensitization, and find that there are different proportions of sensitizers and non-sensitizers in each respective domains. So what this means is that structural alerts alone are really insufficient, and unfortunately, most current models for respiratory sensitization do rely heavily on structural alerts. And so to gain sensitivity and specificity, we do need to go beyond structural alerts. So the model we've developed here has 3 tiers. The first is a mechanistic rule of 2, which relies very simply on a parameter for bioavailability and one for direct reactivity, which is a HOMO-LUMO gap that reflects general electrophilic reactivity. And we see here that the quadrant on the top left that has green and red dots is the only potential safe space. So while a compound that falls in that quadrant is not guaranteed to be safe, it's the most likely combination of properties that can yield a non-sensitizer. And so this is a great first screen and gives us close to 90% accuracy and quite high specificity, but very low sensitivity. And so to further improve that, we develop a global reactivity model, which is based on a quadratic discriminant analysis. And this model now takes into account the reactivity as well as the bioavailability and metabolism, and allows us to increase the accuracy, specificity, and sensitivity to over 90% for binary distinction between sensitizers and non-sensitizers. But that's not sufficient either. To gain further confidence, we've looked at some models that are specific to the domains, and by doing so, we classify them as hard electrophiles, soft electrophiles, or metabolites, and that gives us the ability to both increase our confidence in the predictions and increase the accuracy and specificity of the model to above 90%. And so with that, I hope that I've shown you that we have potentially developed something that may be useful in filling this data gap, and I hope to have the opportunity to discuss that with you further. Please join me in poster room 8 for further discussion. Thank you.
All right. Thanks everyone for sticking with us. Hope you enjoyed these poster presentations. As you can see, the presenters put a lot of work and time into prepping these and trying to explain them as well as possible. And what we've done here is the Symposium committee, we've put a lot of work into trying to figure out how to make this session as interactive as possible and as realistic as possible, like a normal poster session, but in a virtual environment. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to open up some breakout rooms. Each of the poster presenters will be in a breakout room. And if you have at least a recent version of Zoom, you should be able to see all of these breakout rooms and be able to navigate to each one depending on which room you want to be in. And so the way that this works is that on the breakout room screen that you should see something like this, on the right-hand side, you'll see some numbers. And once you hover over that number, you'll be able to see the word join, and it'll ask you whether you want to join that room or not. Then you'll go into that room and you can have a discussion and you can come and go as you please. And when you're ready to leave that room and join a different room, you can bring up that breakout room window, which you should be able to click on at the bottom of your screen, and hover over a number on the right side next to the next room you would like to join. If you are wanting to come back to the main room for whatever reason, one of us organizers will be here. On the bottom right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a blue button that says leave room. It'll give you the option to leave the room, which will bring you back to the main room. Don't click on the button that says leave meeting, because then you will be out of the meeting altogether and will have to re-enter. You'll also be able to see who else is in each room, and you'll be able to kind of navigate that as you wish. Let's see. The last note is that we've been recording this session up to this point, but the breakout sessions will not be recorded. And once we come back together a few minutes before 12:30, we'll start recording again for the last closing part of this session of the meeting. So with that, I think we will open up these breakout rooms. Have fun. We hope you are bringing some questions to interact with the presenters, and I'll be also hopping from room to room to check on everyone. Okay, go forth. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We hope this was a fun and productive poster session, and that there were some good discussions happening. So we are now wrapping up this session, as opposed to in previous days where we took a 30-minute break. Instead, today we're going to dive right in now to the closing session remarks. And this is going to be led by our A4 president, Pam Spencer, and then followed by Joel Tickner, the A4 executive director. So with that, I will now turn this over to Pam.
Great. Well, welcome back, everybody. It's been a really exciting week, and I'm just thrilled with the content that we've had. I can't thank the speakers and the organizers enough. It was really, truly a rich week. So can we move the slides, Monika? Can we use those? So yeah, so just thank you to everybody for these virtual symposiums. It's always a little challenging, and I think it was very well done. So thanks to our presenters, moderators, everybody just pitched in, and it was a very, very good program. Next slide. We would also like to congratulate our A4 student winners. So this is the first year that we're presenting these awards. And you're going to have to forgive me because on my screen it's a little small, but we've got Gitesh Devanini from George Washington University, Aude Bechu from McGill University, and Jessica Lure from George Washington University. Just want to congratulate all of the students. And if we have somebody from the program committee that would like to maybe have a few words to say about this, I give you an opportunity right now. Okay, well, let's just get right to it then on what the student awards are. So each student's going to receive a one-year student membership to A4. We're welcome and delighted to have you be part of that. You're part of our growing membership. Also, Chemicals Without Harm, Policies for a Sustainable World by Ken Geiser. You'll get a copy of that. And you get the opportunity to actually choose a 1-hour mentor session with an A4 Executive Council member of your choice. Would hope that you would take advantage of that. As students, there's lots that you can glean from any one of our members on the Executive Council. So with that, just would like to say congratulations. We appreciated your participation and the great work that you brought forward as part of the poster sessions that we had. Next slide, please. So advancing A4's, are these the right slides? Let's see if we can, I think we had the earlier version of the slides, so bear with us.
you want to show your screen, Pam?
Yeah, let me bring them up and I'll get them. Just 1 second. I've got to navigate to where they are. So give me 1 minute and we'll bring them up. I'll bring them up.
Pam, I can show my, I have them up, so I can show them. Yep,
Okay.
I can show.
Okay, if you've got them, that's great.
There we go. Hold on here.
Perfect.
Let me just scroll through to. There we go.
So I just wanted to leave everybody with a few reflections from the week. Again, we had, like I said, a very, very rich program, and I just really came away with a few key things that I just took away from it. So one, for me, is that I think the symposium really confirmed that there is a critical need to accelerate the field of alternatives assessment. With the things that we're experiencing with the health challenges and environmental challenges, we don't have a lot of room for a margin of error. We've got to get it right as we're replacing materials that are of concern. We can't afford to put materials out there that are at greater risk or similar risks as we go forward. So it's really important that we realize this as a community and that we have an opportunity as a community now to tackle these challenges. We are a community that's diverse in thought and expertise, so we're really uniquely positioned to address these challenges. So the question is, how do we rise to that challenge? How do we step up and bring our collective expertise together to really advance the science? We also heard, and this was, I thought, very great planning on the part of the planning committee, but we really had a lot of different experts from different parts of what I'll call the AA puzzle. You know, we had things on tools, strategies, best practices, you know, what do we need for the future, policies. So now, you know, as I look at it and I reflect on that content from the week, I have to start, and we have to start to begin to think, how do we integrate that? How do we start to put those pieces together into a whole and look for those common threads that can really accelerate the advancement of the scientific discipline of alternatives assessment? So we've got a lot to build on from the symposium, and I'm really optimistic that as a community, we can start to look at that and identify that. And then lastly, I heard this kind of undertones of that there's an emerging need to really start to build consensus as a community and to standardize and certify the alternative assessment process. And that's really with the goal of increasing its transparency, its robustness, its credibility, and I would say its institutionalization and how we use this to make sure that the products and processes that we have out there aren't more or equally harmful. So we're off to a great start. We're not there yet. I'm excited that it leaves us with lots of food for thought and lots of ways that we can go as we look at where we take the association and its goals to the next step. So that said, next slide, please. So we're really at a stage that I'm calling charting our course. We've been in existence, we've been laying the foundation, but now we have to sort of have some thoughtful process about how are we going to move forward. And so the A4 Executive Committee has really been spending time evaluating, you know, what is our role? Where are we going to invest our time? And how are we going to make sure that what we're doing is really advancing that mission? So what we've been doing is we've drafted an A4 strategy. Certainly, I would say, as being part of that process, that the symposium content has confirmed that we're on the right path in most cases, but we do need to circle back and think about what we've heard, and does that require any adjustments, and how do we sharpen now that strategy and the focus? So what I'm going to do is turn it over to Joel, and he's going to take this opportunity. We want to share that draft strategy with all the attendees. This is an excellent opportunity to collect your thoughts and your inputs, and you're valuable members, and we need that input. So we'd like to share, remember this is early, we're just in the draft stages, but we'd like to really close the conference with getting that kind of feedback. So Joel, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Pam. And thank you to everyone for sticking with us for the entire week. It's been a full week and, just so many great presentations. One of the points I heard from a few of the conversations as well is that this field is even broader than we thought, that there are a lot of people doing alternatives assessment who aren't calling it alternatives assessment, but that alternatives assessment permeates a lot of the different work that we do, from chemical design to assessment to sustainability evaluation. All of that is part of the alternatives assessment community. As Pam said, we've built a really vibrant group of dedicated executive committee members, and I want to thank the whole executive committee for all the effort they've put in over the year, and the program committee for the Symposium for the hard work, and obviously also want to thank Molly, Monika, and Jen for the enormous amount of work to make this event function the way it has functioned on the budget, the shoestring budget of a small emerging professional society. As some of our founding executive committee members have said, we may be small, but we're powerful, and we like to have fun being together. So, and in doing that, we put together a set of working groups to develop A4's priorities to grow the organization and increase its impact in mission over the next 2 years. And we wanted to focus on 3 key areas. One is creating high-value programs and resources on alternatives assessment and form substitution. 2 is to expand membership. And 3 is to create a sustainable funding model. And part of that effort is an effort that actually spawned the A4 as a community of practice for the field, which is to establish a public-private center of excellence for the field of alternatives assessment, to serve as the home for methodological development, for peer review, for training and education. So all of those are in our strategic plan for the coming years. And each of the working groups then went to develop a set of actions over the next 2 years to measure growth in the organization and where it can go. So these are some of them, right? Expand membership in Europe, and we've heard even in Asia, because it is a market where most manufacturers have production facilities. In fact, this morning I found an article in my Google alerts that an article that came from on alternatives assessment and substitution from researchers in Bangladesh, Thailand, and China. So these experts in the field exist, and we need to pull them into our network. So grow the network and create a truly international society. The exciting part of this is that for the symposium, we doubled our membership in Europe. We're still a small society. We're at about 100 members. We don't see this as being the Society for Toxicology or the Society for Risk Analysis or CTAC. This is going to be a relatively small group of dedicated people that then leverage other organizations or share expertise with other professional organizations. Creating a business plan that has a clear value proposition for the A4 and for the members of the A4. To encourage our members and other stakeholders to publish articles in alternatives assessment and form substitution and proceedings from the symposium. One of our key next steps for our postdoc, Monika Roy, is to start looking at the literature and try to track the literature on alternatives assessment, in form substitution and parallel fields to show how this is a growing field. Certainly, there are increasing regulatory and market drivers of informed substitution that are pushing alternatives assessment forward. Connecting with key agencies and other strategic partners like SOT for this workshop, or CTAC for our previous in-person symposium, to really offer our expertise, but expand our scope and our ability to reach more professionals. Going back to the membership side, one key area of membership we have not hit is the academic community. We have a very small academic group. We've been more on the practice side. Well, we need to increase that academic engagement as well. And then to expand our programming, particularly discussion groups. We've had a very vibrant discussion group in the A4 on alternatives assessment and policy, but we're looking at other areas, for example, NAMs, or working on how we assess complex mixtures. So we do really want your input on the greatest opportunities for us to build this community moving forward. I'm going to take a break here and ask you, you can either write in the chat or raise your hand and just get feedback from those of you who are still with us now about, both the symposium. We're going to be sending out, by the way, an evaluation of the symposium. We really would like and value your input so we can design our next symposium, which we are going to aim for an in-person symposium next year in the same week at the end of October. So we will be hopefully announcing place and timing very soon. But let's get your feedback now on both the symposium and directions, opportunities for A4. You can either raise your hand or put it in the box. Thank you as well for all the positive feedback on the symposium in the chat. Thoughts from folks, particularly those who might be new to the A4? And just for those who haven't said anything, we're not a very shy community, so you can feel free to raise your hand, to unmute, turn on your camera. We're very open to engagement with everyone.
Hey, Joel, this is Scott. How are you?
Scott.
I just want to say from my perspective and the types of things we're trying to do with EDHC, and I think it's filling a niche between. I mean, you can go to CTAC or any of the other organizations and really get down into the weeds on complete assessments, but I think it's a good bridge to bridge the gap between a lot of the tools that we see different brands developing and the actual, the real rooted in the whole science of LCA and hazard assessments. So I think it's really fills a need of trying to bridge that gap and keep people moving ahead in places where, the brands and things, they don't necessarily have time to wait for somebody to fully do some of these things, but they just need a direction to get started so that at least they're going in the right direction, and try to keep people, at least get them aligned on a general process that, once some organization or government comes out with a requirement, that at least the basis for what they're doing is rooted in that, and then they can adjust it if they need to meet some sort of a requirement. But I think it's filling a great need that we have.
Great, that's really helpful, Scott. And one of our hopes over the coming year is to really create for A4 members a directory of where are the resources, right? Who can you contact if you need help in figuring out this part of a method or an approach? One of the great benefits of the A4 community is it's diverse. We've got people who have expertise in toxicology and exposure science, and we have chemists, we have engineers, we have policy experts. We have some folks who have expertise in life cycle assessment. So it really is a great community that looks at these various parts of the alternatives assessment process.
Yeah, and I think bridging across those different disciplines, it's so critical. I mean, we have to do that. I think about, you know, even as I look in my own organization, my R&D group could come up with something just fantastic from a manufacturing side, and it looks great from a safety side, but maybe we're creating twice as much waste. You know, it's important to have those cross conversations, and I think having a membership directory to know where our expertise lies will be really helpful.
Kathy, go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to add that one of the value that I see with A4 as a professional membership is that because of the size, you're not going to get lost as a member. You have something to contribute, and it gives an opportunity for folks to share their perspectives. And, you know, we all probably have our expertise, as Pam and Julie were saying, but the A4 sort of bridges that gap. And, you know, as much as I'm a CTAC member, I'm active in CTAC, but as an opportunity to sort of really get your voice heard, places like CTAC and SOT don't necessarily offer that the way that I think A4 does. So it is something to consider for those with new members that are new members now because of joining the symposium this year. You know, I really encourage you to take that opportunity to engage, because this is a platform I think that is really unique.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. And Kathy's been leading our discussion on policy, which has just been really, really thoughtful and some great back and forth and learning. I mean, this is a learning community, right? It's a growing field. We're figuring it out as we go. As we heard in the first day, right? Early fields have a lot of bumps in the road to grow, and you know we need everyone's input to do that. Other thoughts or lessons people pulled away from the last couple of days, especially folks who are new to the A4 area? Or areas where we should be jumping into the future?
This is Michelle Fishback from DTSE.
Great, thanks for joining.
Yeah, I think this was my first A4. I work with the AA team in our program, in the Safe for Consumers program. And I think one of our, oh yeah, sorry, my bad, I didn't start my video, I was just talking. One of the things that sparked a lot of interesting conversation yesterday was Vina Singla's talk on how to incorporate environmental justice into like the life cycle considerations and in AA. We, and also myself, we've been like really, really interested in trying to incorporate more of the environmental justice into our work, into everything we do. And that was really, I mean, of course, there were not very good news, but it was really inspiring to like just keep doing what we're doing. And yeah, as one of, I guess, the newer members in our team, I just felt really inspired. So thank you for putting that together. I know our team is still very much interested, and we are looking forward to continue this conversation.
Great, that's really helpful, Michelle, and an area where I think we need to be doing more thoughtful work is how do we, ensure that environmental justice considerations are inherent in the way we think about alternatives, because often we're thinking about alternatives because of the problems that were created by the incumbent chemistries. So it makes sense to make sure that we're not creating new challenges or new inequities as part of this process. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other thoughts that people have? We'll continue on. This was really, really thoughtful and helpful. Well, we will give you another opportunity to send your thoughts. Go ahead, Larry. Thank you. And Larry's like one of our champions in the A4, so I really appreciate and a doer in the alternatives assessment community. And he just never gives up either.
Well, this just by coincidence, it doesn't mean I'm giving up, but this is my last day of my formal work. I'm retiring as of the end of today. So, but
oh my goodness,
I'm not retiring from the safer chemistry and the AA world. So I still am planning on staying involved in that. But I used to be in kind of my past part of my career, I was pretty involved in the field of industrial ecology. And I kind of think of alternatives assessment sort of similar to that, in a sense that it's a field and a discipline that involves a lot of different aspects to it. And so the one thing that kind of centered me is that Yale University they publish a journal out of that university on industrial ecology. And I kind of think of UMass Lowell in a sense as a default AA center in a sense. But I think expanding the academic and really having it as a kind of a formal discipline within an academic university that can help kind of center act as kind of a center point, a place to go in a sense. And then maybe eventually have a dedicated alternatives assessment journal that's dedicated to alternatives assessments. Might be something to consider for the future. And like I said, in this field of industrial ecology, they have a journal that I use. I guess you can't really see it because I have a blurry thing going on, but totally dedicated that, so you could see within this one journal all these different kinds of approaches to industrial ecology and what everyone's doing in one place. And it just made it handy to really become more knowledgeable about that field. So
great. No, that's really helpful. And certainly is that the thinking in industrial ecology is now sort of centering around the new terminology of the circular economy. There's a really important role for alternatives assessment, ensuring that we have safe and sustainable circular materials. But, and frankly, it would have been good at the time of industrial ecology. There was an article I remember years and years ago by Barry Commoner on the circular economy and toxicity. And thank you. And Larry, and thank you for, I think we should raise a toast to Larry for, so many years being a champion for this field and all of the hard work you've done on the ground for so many years, Larry. So thank you for your contributions to safer and healthier communities.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm hopefully I'm not disappearing from the planet, so I'll be still involved.
We will keep you involved, don't worry.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you, Larry. Nicole.
Unmute. Hi, everyone. Thanks again. This has been really excellent. I think I just wanted to reiterate or just revoice something that actually Saskia had brought up in one of our breakout sessions, which is there's really a need to kind of be comfortable with the unknown, be comfortable with the uncertainty. It's kind of seems maybe a little bit counterintuitive, but just having the humility to understand that science is evolving, our understanding of the ways that we're assessing the safety, and just understanding the way that the science itself evolves to be able to do these things meaningfully. That there is uncertainty. There's uncertainty in the answers we can provide at this time, and I think that that should be okay, right? I think that there should be a space to highlight that, because it is creating information. The uncertainty creates information, and more specifically in areas where there are clear data gaps in the way that we can assess things as we move forward. That helps us understand where we need to fill it in. So I just wanted to kind of bring that a little bit more clearly to the table. I know that I think a lot of us want to make sure that things are really actionable and that we have clear ways to move forward. But I think not having, having the humility of understanding that things are always shifting, and that things are not super clear right now is important. And I think, also just to tie back to the environmental justice lens, I think it's an important one, not just because it is on its own, but I think that it does bring to light the considerations we have around who are the populations of concern, when we're evaluating safety of an, of a chemical or its best use. So I think that came to light yesterday in some conversations where for a manufacturer, if you're like, well, if what I can produce will actually provide a better outcome for the end user, that should be maybe be the most important focus. But if that thing will also, in the making of it, be a real issue for the fence line communities, we should be having these conversations, because it's not that any one party is right or wrong. It's just that we need to make sure that we're thinking about it more holistically. So I appreciate the space that's been created for all these conversations, and I'll leave it there. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Nicole. That's great input. And I think there's a lot to do, with the methodological development. Clearly Hans's presentation today, and I know he's working with Occupational on this, is really how do we deal with uncertainty better, and really understand what those uncertainties are in the assessments, and then fill those data gaps through NAMs or other types of information. We also heard in the chat, folks want to know, they want to just get lots of case studies of, the application side of substitutes. Like, what are the challenges we face, both methodological and adoption challenges, and how do we overcome those challenges? So that's in some ways what makes the A4 unique, because we're dealing with the methodologies of how do we assess, how do we get the data, and then the issues of, well, once we have those data, what are the challenges of applying those data or evaluating and then actually making a decision based on those data? So all of those seem really important to the community we have. So and resources and best practices as well are pretty key, particularly as we heard around these issues of how do we address environmental justice considerations in the assessment process. So we've got lots of things to do. I know we're hitting time now, so we're happy with where we're going, right? We've had Northwest Green Chemistry doing an assessment of how we're doing as an organization, and I've spoken to a few other budding professional associations, and you have 100 members. We're at about 100 members in 3 years, and that's a pretty good metric of a growing society, and the engagement we have of participants in the symposium and the executive committee. So we're thrilled about the future, and and these are the areas where we think we need to go: is advance the needle on methods, policy, and practice, have high-value programs that attract different audiences, and ultimately to be a sustainable and growing multidisciplinary professional society that does leading edge thinking that's connected to policy and the marketplace, and clearly connecting to other organizations. So, just for just one update, we do have a webinar actually coming up in 3 weeks. We don't stop. We haven't given our program committee and our staff at UMass Lowell that's been managing the A4 a break. We have a great presentation coming up in 3 weeks, so join us for that. And obviously, join the A4. If you're not a member yet, come and join us. It's a great organization, a great group of people, and the community is a really increasingly powerful one. So let me pass back to Pam for any last words. Again, thank you to all the organizations that have supported us in this symposium and are critical to our growth moving forward. So Pam, with that, I'll let you wrap up.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I just want to thank everybody again. Joel, thanks for presenting the draft strategy. Please give us your comments. Send them to Joel or I or anybody on the executive committee. We'd love to hear from you as you get time to think about it. And just my sincere thanks again to everybody. This has been a wonderful week. So looking forward to next year and looking forward to the other programs that we'll have throughout the coming year. So thank you.
And have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks for sticking with us to the end as well.
Exactly. All right. Bye-bye.
I